Hey everyone, Rosie here. Before we get started with this episode, we just want to send a big thank you to our partner, Coffee Co., for their support of the show. They're a convenient subscription service offering specialty grade, single source, 100% Arabica coffee available in whole bean and drip grind. Check out grindcoffeeco.com.
Hey, this is Kris Marks from VIV Mental Health, and you're listening to the Builder Sessions.
Welcome to the Builder Sessions, a podcast where we chat with your favorite builders.
We get to know them, their stories, and hopefully inspire you off the couch and build something cool. I'm Hoff.
And I'm Rosie. And on this episode, we have Kris Marks from VIV Mental Health. We dive into the stigma of mental health in the trades, his experience moving from a journeyman machinist to a mental health advocate, and the importance of knowing yourself in order to better take care of yourself.
Please enjoy our interview with Kris.
Kris, welcome to the Builder Sessions.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. It's great to be here. I really appreciate you reaching out.
We're really excited we're going to dive into some awesome stuff today. We're going to dive deep into this. I just want to break this apart and encourage people. But first, before we kind of get into the heavy stuff, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey, and how you got to where you are?
Yeah. And hey, we'll destigmatize one thing right off the bat. Mental health isn't always heavy. And
Fair enough.
I really, I can't stress it enough. I'll put it this way. So your listeners may not be able to see me. I got 3 guitars on the wall behind me. I use music in my mental health advocacy. I do mental health stand-up comedy, which is as terrifying as it sounds. But you know, it's not all heavy and it's not all weird. But we'll get to that part. So so my name is Kris Marks. I am the owner and founder of a company called VIV Mental Health. And prior to that role, I worked for 14 years in the trades. I'm a journeyman Red Seal machinist. So that was my Alberta boy upbringing. My 20s and 30s were spent working blue collar, and I loved machining. And how I got into it, my first few years after high school, for a lot of people, I think they're pretty exploratory. So I did, what did I do? Door-to-door sales. I worked at Subway for a day and Denny's for a day. I can't work with food. So you gotta discover yourself, right? I couldn't make these beautiful sandwiches and then just give them away. Like I tried really hard on that. It's a thankless job. So it wasn't for me. So I kind of fell into the trades, and there's more to my backstory, which I'll get into maybe in a little bit. But I was 24 when I enrolled in NAIT. I was working at a shop up in Grand Prairie. I like to say that I did my time in Grand Prairie.
A lot of people have.
But it was right. Yeah. I mean, it was 2008. Alberta was booming. They couldn't find enough warm bodies to work anywhere. And I was up there trying to get my life back in order, actually. And the owner apprenticed me. He kind of said, "Hey, you know, you're pretty smart." I started off as a sawyer, like cutting steel, and did that for a few months. And he was like, "No, like you're like really good at this. I think we'll put you on a lathe. I need you on a lathe." And that's kind of how my trades career started. So I put myself through 4 years in NAIT and came out as a Red Seal journeyman. And worked that for the next, do my math, 10 years as a journeyman, 4 as an apprentice. COVID hit, and a lot of us got laid off. The whole world kind of stopped at that time. And throughout those 10 years, working in different shops and everything, I was, as much as I loved machining, because as an artist, musician, and guy who likes to be on stage and stuff, it's a high precision steel metalworking art, and there's a lot of pressure. Your job is to be perfect every day. The tolerances are the breadth of a hair or split a few times. But it was taking a raw chunk of forged steel, 4140 or whatever, and making it into something absolutely perfect. And I dug that for years. I was like, this is cool. Your listeners also can't see the color of my hair. It's pretty much silver now. And a lot of the stress that I faced in the trades really affected me. It took a lot of like reflection afterwards to kind of realize just how much of a physical and mental toll the trades took on me, especially one with that kind of expectation of high precision. So COVID hit, I got laid off, and I kind of used it as an opportunity to pursue something that I've always been passionate about, which is mental health in so many capacities. And I went back to school. I enrolled in psychology through Athabasca, and I got a certification through the Canadian Mental Health Association as a psychological health and safety advisor. So from that spawned a podcast, just like you guys, called the VIV Mental Health Podcast. I started sharing my life story, which is quite the story, and I've been going hard ever since. I do workplace training now, and there's a whole bunch of different elements to VIV: workplace training, classroom education. Do a lot of consulting. I do a lot of community work. So I work with, like today, I was just telling you, I was doing an event in rural Alberta, central Alberta and Leduc County for their seniors. So we're promoting seniors, combating ageism, and talking about their mental health as well. So in a nutshell, that's kind of my journey. And then as we move along, I'll kind of piece together how I ended up from steel toes to mental health.
We can go there now if you want.
You want to go there now?
Sure.
Okay. I need a little sip of my hot chocolate here.
Before we do that, you talk about pressure of the precision. Maybe for some of our listeners, machinist is, from my understanding, is like, what's the tolerance when you talk about precision? Are we, 100 thou, or what is kind of your typical allowance for stuff that puts that pressure on that, that you need to be perfect? We're not talking, maybe a quarter of an inch for framers or a 16th for cabinet makers. You're going down to,
thousandths of an inch and 10 thousandths of an inch. So the width of the human hair is about 1 thou, 1 to 2 thou. If you're blonde, it's a little bit thinner. I regularly worked with intolerances of half a thousandth of an inch for some of these components that had to just have that precision fit, let alone the precision finish. So there are ways we can measure finish in microns. We have machines that'll tap the surface of a piece of steel to make sure it's the right acceptable smoothness. So anything under the hood of your car. I worked on one piece that ended up going up to NASA. Actually, we did work for a company in Texas, and that ended up on a spaceship. So aviation machining is something that is people are probably familiar with. So if you work in and around aviation, you know that the tolerances are very, very tight. Obviously, we're taking a bus and throwing it up in the air, so things have to work really perfect.
Yeah.
The average lifespan of an aviation machinist is about 5 years max. Average. So after 5 years dealing with those tolerances day in, day out, it burns guys out. So that's kind of an accepted collateral damage of aviation machining. Now, oil field machining, which is what I was predominantly in, oil field and agriculture. If we, on a good day, we'd have parts with plus or minus 5 thou, which was great. That's almost like a saw cut in our line of work.
Yeah.
And then, but on average, it was like thousandths of an inch, couple thou, either side if we're lucky, right? So it was the expectation was you had to be perfect. That was your job. And it really never got spoken about. We all just kind of leaned into what that meant. But I mean, at 8:01 in the morning, you have to be fully present, because not only do you have the tolerances to hit, it's a really dangerous job. And I have the scars and stories to prove it. I mean, you guys are shop teachers, right? So you might have a wood lathe and planers and stuff like that in the shop.
Yeah.
So I worked on a metal lathe. So same thing. I have this chunk of steel hurtling at 8,000 RPM more. And it's wide open because I have to do hand work on this thing. I'm doing threading sometimes by hand with different tools, and I'm exposed to this thing. So if it's not balanced perfectly, if I didn't chuck it tight, and I have to think about my order of operations constantly, people get maimed and killed in machining. So there's that element of danger, which adds to the stress of it, right? So you can't show up and not be there, because you could either hurt yourself or you screw up the job, you can't put steel back on, right? So you have one shot at hitting these tolerances. Most of these pieces, you can't just lay a piece of weld on and try again. Like
Yeah.
it's one shot, and you get hours, hundreds of hours into one component. You're on the last couple steps, and if you're not, it's a lot of pressure. And I'm not under or overselling it. It is quite a bit.
You're probably underselling it by the sounds of things,
Maybe, yeah.
right?
Wow.
Like that's crazy.
Can't just go, buy another, or not buy, grab another chunk of wood, or go get another chunk of steel and weld it together. Like that's that pressure side of, there's one side of completing a job, but then there's the pressure of, you're supposed to be a perfectionist day
Correct.
in, day out, which I'm sorry, but it's hard to be perfect for,
How do you do it?
40
then, buddy?
hours a week.
How do you do it?
I'm
Oh,
not a
okay.
perfectionist, not by any means.
It's
like,
yeah, it's something that you kind of have to get used to. And when I was going to Nate, it it never got talked about, like what you would face kind of in industry and what it was like to do this for hours and hours a day, every day for 5 days a week. We'd have shop class for 4 hours twice a week, I think it was. And that was your apprenticeship exposure. And then you're out in the field, like working and whatever. But it's, they don't really prepare you for how intense that mindset can be. Some of these chunks of steel we get, like Inconel, for example, is a very tough stainless steel. It's used in rigorous applications where it's going to take a beating. It needs to last. A chunk, I'm just going to spitball. So say 1.5 feet by 12 inches round of Inconel could cost $10,000. That's what comes in on the pallet. So that's the risk you're working with right off the bat. And plus you're dealing with this steel that is unforgiving. It chews up your tools. It acts in certain ways. And anyway, all that to say, gentlemen, it's high pressure.
Plus the timelines of getting it done on time, or
oh yeah, there's somebody waiting for it too.
Because they need it yesterday, obviously, right?
Yeah. You know how an oil field works, right?
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
So you probably weren't alone. You have, like you said, you had a couple people you probably worked with. Did you just grin and bear this? Like you just kind of look at each other. Yeah, okay. You're getting, you understand, I understand, but you never really talked about it. What was that like? Especially when let's say something screwed up. Were you like supportive of each other at least, or just kind of an island?
I had the luxury of working for some really great owners, working under some great journeymen, guys from Germany who really had a presence and calmness about them. There was a lot of mentorship in my trade. In the best case scenario, I would be surrounded by guys who were long tenured and would come over and say, okay, here's some advice here. Let's do this bit together. Here's what I would do. That was super helpful. In other shops that I worked in, they were high production. So you get your widget and get your work order. You're kind of a mushroom. You're in the dark and they feed you,
Yeah.
and you were kind of left to your own devices and your own skills to just pump out this widget, which after a while gets to be really uninspiring. And, they allot for a certain amount of mistakes within an order, a run of 100 or whatever. But each one is money. And it was such a money driven time, like oil and gas. It's so everything's money. So you screw up once, you hear about it. And it just kind of comes back to that. You're just expected to do it right pretty much every time. And it juxtaposed with the places I worked where it wasn't as supportive. I didn't stay in those environments very long. But the last guy that I worked with, his name was Dino, owns a shop up in Edmonton here. Brilliant machinist, brilliant brain. And he'd probably admit this too, he's not the most patient guy, but a compassionate guy. And he worked with us and some of the apprentices that came in through the shop. He was kind enough to share his wealth of knowledge because he had such a massive skill set. He came from Quebec. He was a mold maker.
Wow.
So when you buy plastic chairs, for example, that mold and all the cool little curves and stuff, the mold that made that chair is the most high precision thing you can imagine, to keep it repetitive so that those chairs fall out when they're done, and like any imperfection is no bueno. So yeah, I had a nice mix of supports and everything, but generally speaking, day to day, we just came in and did our job, and there was no patting on the back and going, hey, like, great thread, you know, you really that undercut was perfect. You really bored that out. Awesome, Jimmy. It
Love
was
it.
yeah, it was more just like, hey, we're all doing it.
You
So
rock that mic today.
that's
Hey?
right. Yeah, I was pumping you guys up before we started recording here. So
So how did you like growing up, how did you get into this? Like, did you, were you proficient in shop class? What was that like before you got into this industry?
oh, okay, this is a story. No is the answer to that.
Okay, moving on.
I
Yeah.
was a city slicker. I grew up playing hockey and stuff, but I was an artsy kid. So I loved drama class. I started learning guitar at 12. I was the guitar kid, the guy who was doing drama shows. And, my dad and I, we'd work on projects at home and, build a fence or whatever. But my trades, you know, propensity was not high. Like I either wanted to be the lead singer of Collective Soul or
Yes.
acting as Prince Charming and in a fringe play or something. But my early 20s were pretty tumultuous. Um, I guess, you know what? Maybe this is a good time to kind of dive into like how I got into the trades, because it really came out of necessity. It came out of like there was a demand, and I was at such a critical point in my life. I could have gone one of two ways, and it was finding a trade and like just having a purpose. And machining was artsy enough, creative enough that it just tickled that enough that I was able to do it. But um, my high school years were pretty good, except for one event that happened in grade 10. And if you go back and listen to the first couple episodes of my own podcast, I kind of talk about what happened. But it was an extremely traumatic event. It stemmed out of um, boys being boys, is what we used to call it, hazing, right? And it escalated into a pretty substantial assault, we'll call it, and it changed me from that day forward. I never slept the same. I questioned my sexuality. As a teenager, as a boy, and your dad's your hockey coach, and you go through something like this. It was horrific, and I went from being a straight A student, honor student, to barely graduating in 3 years. So I skipped a lot of school. I didn't want to go to school. I kept this secret for many, many years, and my home life took a hit too. So I'm a child of divorced parents, and my dad remarried. I was living with him and my stepmom and two younger siblings. And now I'm in this angsty teen phase. I got this dark secret. I was isolating myself in the basement. Anyway, I graduated at 18, and 2 weeks after I graduated, my dad and my stepmom said, "You know what? We think you're a problem here, and you need to leave at 18 years old with like nothing." They just said, "Yeah, you're the problem here. You have to go." And I was stunned. Like, I didn't know what to do. I had $500 in a Canada savings bond that I cashed to get my first apartment in like the worst part of Edmonton. That was all I could afford. And ever since, I just winged it. And before we started recording, I was telling you, I worked as a whatever I could. I was door-to-door salesman selling alarm systems. I was working at Subway and just trying to survive. And being the first of my friend group to have his own place, you could at 18.
Yeah, party time.
You can imagine what kind of place I had, right?
Yeah.
It was the place to be.
Yeah.
So I crushed 2 years winging it and partying. And this was back in 2002. And I came home one day from my salesman job, and there was an extra lock on my door. Back when you could do that. I'd been evicted. I was locked out. All my things were in there. What few things I had no ID, no car, no cell phone. They didn't exist. I had no access to money, like nothing. And I was wearing a black lambskin leather jacket and khakis. I will remind your listeners, it was 2002. That looked good back then.
Yeah, that's a good choice back then.
Yeah, it's right. It's sharp. And that was the first night I slept outside in the worst part of Edmonton. I found a bank vestibule where I could curl up under the ATMs, and I slept there. And I had no way to get a hold of my friends. You can imagine I was kind of estranged from my family at this time. I felt really betrayed that they kicked me out. Even though I never told them why, my grades and my attitude slipped. So that wasn't an option. I had no way to call them anyway. And so anyway, I was unhoused for 6 or 7 weeks. And it was surreal, to be honest. I had picked food out of garbage. I stole food and cigarettes and walked around really alone. And for a city kid, I was living in Sherwood Park, which is a suburb of Edmonton. That's where I graduated from. So it's upper middle class. That was kind of my background. And it was horrible. And I remember one day I was picking through garbage, and this woman who was unhoused saw me in my khakis and black lambskin, and she came over and she's like, "What are you doing?" And I didn't know what to say. And she's like, "You don't belong here." And I said, "No shit." And she looked at me and gave me a hug. And that was a big deal. That was after a couple of weeks of this. And she saw that I didn't belong. And she's like, "Well, stay away from so-and-so and don't sleep there." And she's like, "Here's a place where you can get a warm meal. Come back and say hi, and hope you're okay." And that piece of compassion at that time, I was like 20, was everything to me. I thought everybody had kind of given up on me. And around the same time, and I'll just give your listeners fair warning, it gets a touch heavier here. We'll come back from it though. But I did attempt to take my own life at that time. And I felt like I just given up on myself, and it was a very spur of the moment event. And someone saw it and helped me. And that was kind of a turning point in my life. I was really scared. I just didn't know who I was anymore. And so I called an old friend back in Sherwood Park. I said, "Hey," I lied, right? I said, "Hey, just got evicted. Can I come crash on your couch at your parents' place?" And his parents took me in and set me up in the basement with him. And I never told a soul any like what happened in high school, what happened recently. Lied the whole time. And started to slowly get back on my feet. I got in touch with my parents, and they were living in Grand Prairie at the time. So, I'm about 23, 24. And I said, I want to get my life back together. And at first they didn't believe me. And then I called, Christmas came and went, and I called them back and I said, "No, I'm serious." And my dad's like, "Okay, I believe you. You're really willing to move up to Grand Prairie, leave all your friends behind and start over?" I said, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, I play hockey with a guy who owns a machine shop, and he'll get you started as a laborer." I said, "Sure." And that's how it started. He put me on the bandsaw, cutting steel. Back when I could cut lengths, a quarter inch was good, but no heavy tolerances at this time.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, he recognized that I had a bit more chutzpah and wits about me, and he needed guys on a lathe. So he put me on there and kind of coached me, and I got the hang of it. And he's like, well, I'll put you through school too. So I did my first 2 years at Nate's while working up there, and then I moved back to Edmonton and kept that secret for years. But anyway, so my biggest thing was depression, anxiety, and I didn't sleep right after what happened to me. And I I would have night terrors, and I thought they were nightmares. And it's important to discern the difference between the two. So a nightmare, you wake up and you're like, geez, that sucked. That was awful. You're sweating a bit, and you're breathing heavy, and then eventually you can go back to sleep. Or you wake up and it's kind of fizzles away in an hour or whatever. A night terror is like hot glue of a nightmare. It sticks with you. It could be for hours, days. If you were dreaming about something horrifically embarrassing, humiliating, you'll wake up with that, and you'll feel that throughout your day. You'll feel humiliated. Like it's such a permeating experience. And so I would have these frequently all through my 20s, which caused me to lose a lot of sleep. And I would call in sick. I'd be working at a shop, and I can't come in today. And the real reason was that I hadn't slept in like 3 days, and I was severely depressed. I hadn't got out of bed. I hadn't eaten. And I had to tell my employer that I was sick, which was a lie. And then I became that flaky employee who didn't show up enough. I get fired, and depression would kick in. I'm terrible at this. I can't even function. And I was so hard on myself. I always thought pretty highly of myself, and the sense of disappointment, I disappoint this employer. Over and over again, the cycle would continue. And it was a really tough grind through the trades. So I was 31, and I was in a relationship, and I'd have night terrors, and I'd go and sleep on the couch. And this partner of mine accused me of going, sneaking downstairs to like text other women or something. And I was horrified. And I tried to explain what was going on, and she didn't really get it. And I wasn't explaining it right. And that relationship ended. And that was kind of when I realized, I'm like, I gotta figure this out. Like, it's touching my work life, my relationships. And I found a guy who did pro bono once a week counseling in the city here downtown. So I booked an appointment, and then the day came and I canceled it. And so I booked it again, and the day came and I canceled again. The third or fourth time I kept it, and I went. So I sat down in his office. I had 1 hour for free with him, and I told him everything from what happened to me at 15, about being unhoused, about trying to take my life, and these dreams. And after an hour, I wasn't even halfway through, and he said, just keep going. And I'm crying, and he's crying. And I finish, and he's the first, I'm going back there a little bit. He was the first person on earth who knew my truth. And all the times that I put on a brave face, I was the guitar guy at the parties, and then the funny guy. And he was the first one that knew everything. And he looked at me and he said, Kris, I work at the Edmonton Max prison, the remand center. That's my day job. And I work with men who have been through similar experiences as you, very similar, and they've ended up with me. And you need to know that by your own will, you have managed to forge a life dealing with all this stuff. You got a career, you're a journeyman. You've had multiple healthy relationships. You have a friend support network. You reconciled with your family. And he was the first one to kind of give me any sort of context about what I had been through and what I was overcoming. And it opened the floodgates. I was like, therapy's great. I need this.
Yeah.
And I went to him for many months. I took a break, found somebody different. And I've been a loyal, I go once a month now to check in and to kind of just for that context, for somebody to guide me through my challenges, and hooked up with not hooked up, but like was introduced to a psychiatrist, and he's like, here, let's try you on some medication that might help you sleep a little sounder and help regulate the depressive the dips. So my dips aren't so deep anymore. And I wasn't a guy who was into like medication and stuff, but it was worth a try. And we found something that works at like really low doses. And that's been my journey. And like, I just look back on my trades career, and I wish, one, that I felt safe enough to tell some of these bosses what was actually going on, because there was that shop culture, male dominated industries kind of you just didn't speak up like that. And two, I wish I would have just gotten around that and been honest, because I hated lying to them. I hated saying that I was sick all the time. So that's what inspired me to work in mental health. After my trades career was done, I said, I want to change. We spend a third of our waking lives at work. Like, think about that. We deserve support we can't just check our baggage at the door. That's not a real thing. Like, we know that now. And I think it's crucial to address it. Everybody goes through stuff. You go through a divorce, you got a parent that's passing away, you have it, you're drinking too many beers on the weekend. Mental health is like, it's 100% of us. We have a brain, we have an existence, so we have mental health to manage. And I just feel really passionately about doing that at work. It doesn't have to be weird. You don't have to everybody doesn't have to share their life, but put the supports in place where people can access them anonymously, safely. Doesn't affect their ability to move up or down in the company. And so that's what I built VIV off of.
Why do you think that the shop culture is that way? Like, how do you think we got there? And why do you think it is that people don't feel safe? Because that's you nailed it, right? Not feeling, and I don't even think it's just in shop culture, right? Everywhere I've worked, it's just weird to share and open up and be like, well, I think I need a day just to kind of take it easy. I'm kind of anxious. It's like,
well, I get fired on the spot for saying that.
Yeah.
Or reprimanded somehow, right?
So why do you think it is?
Well, I'm gonna start here. Things are changing, thankfully. It's slow, but just because people get older and retire and a new generation comes up with different values, different experiences, we are seeing a shift. It's not there yet, not even close, but I will give props to society as a whole that we are starting to embrace workplace mental health, take it seriously, and invest in it. To answer your question, there's a few different ways to look at this. One, I'll just address the elephant in the room. The trades are predominantly male dominated, and toxic masculinity is allowed to perpetuate in those shop environments. We look at Hockey Canada. They just went through this huge scandal with sexual assault and harassment and misogyny rampant, and it was normalized. And there is a propensity for men to adhere to the herd culture. And there are, you have those loud voices on the shop floor and lunchroom and that, and maybe they're tenured, maybe they're just loud, maybe they're intimidating. And all of a sudden you find yourself laughing at jokes that you don't find funny, but you're trying to fit in. Or you're an apprentice and you're just trying to learn and show up and do your job. And there's things happening that objectively you're like, this is wrong. Like, why did he just grab the receptionist like that? and you don't say anything. And it's there. And you know what? Like I speak pretty candidly about my experiences in the trades. I saw a lot of things that I didn't agree with. I heard even more that I hated and didn't agree with. And I didn't speak up. And I didn't advocate on someone's behalf who was getting bullied in the workplace or harassed in the workplace. And I was privy, I was part of that. And that's a shitty thing to admit. That sucks to know that. And I can't go back and turn back the clock and change my own behavior or my own, passive input into allowing it to happen. There's a word that I'm trying to think of that's escaping me. But we can change behavior moving forward for sure. And I think we are. We just there's ways to do it that. So you raised a really good scenario where you're like, I can't imagine going into work and everybody's like talking about their feelings, and then Daryl's like, I'm having an anxious day, I'm gonna take off at lunch, and everyone's like, way to go, Daryl, like that's okay.
Way to be self-aware, Daryl.
Got to be self-aware, self-care, buddy.
Yeah.
That's not what it looks like.
Yeah.
Like in the work that I do, truly. But it's such a big stigma with employers, especially. These folks are older. They come from a different mindset, different generation.
Yeah.
Bootstraps pulling them up, that sort of thing. Tough it out. That's their worldview, and we can't really blame them for that. That's what they experienced.
It's all they know. It's all they know.
That's all they know. I have a lot of compassion for those conversations. I'll meet anybody where they're at with any questions. But the biggest thing is like, well, I don't want it to be weird. I don't want to rock the boat. There's a lot of fear behind inaction. Mm-hmm. And that's something that's one of the biggest barriers that we try to overcome, is that the worst thing you can do is nothing. But we have these conversations with ourselves, and we hear mental health, and you got a business to run, and you're like, I'll pay them more, or I'll take them out for pizza.
That'll fix it.
Yeah, right. So anyway, I just want to dispel the notion that it's like men having heart-to-hearts.
Yeah, you're not sitting around in a circle
singing
singing
meeting,
Kumbaya.
right?
Yeah.
No, it's not that. It's systemic and cultural support within a workplace. And it's honestly, it only takes one. And one of my mottos is like, I'll go first. Like you brought me on your show, but you didn't ask to hear my life story. I just kind of offered it to give this context that I'll go first. I'll tell you what it was like and how much stress I put on myself. I bring my work home and I drink too much, I'd smoke too much weed. And then I got to be on tomorrow. Like, oh my God, it's 7 a.m. I'm hungover. Like, whoa, like I got to, that I'll go first. I'll tell you what it was like. Now let's talk about what we can do, in your shop at 20. Mm-hmm. And it's individual. Like, what's that culture like?
And what are the needs, right? What are the needs of that place?
What are the needs? And are we communicating with our workforce and giving them like a safe place to do it? So as an employer, you got to be ready for maybe a little bit of criticism, maybe a little bit of harsh truths. And as an employee, when you're having that conversation, it's important to be cognizant of the fact that your employer is feeling this out too. So like, you got to work together, and it may not happen overnight, but as long as both parties are trying to meet in the middle, and the employer is like, well, I want you here, I need you here. How can I help? How can I support? What can I learn to help support you every day, be more passionate, whatever it is. And employees need to understand that, like, yes, it's important that you advocate for yourself, but you are part of the process too. And it's important to understand that your employer may have hesitations. It may feel strange to them and foreign, and that's okay. Meet them, let's figure this out together.
Some of this stuff, like you talked about fitting in, and maybe I think for a lot of people trying to earn the respect of the journeyman or journey person they're working under, the culture of the shop, trying to impress people, fitting in. Is there also a learned behavior of, what it's like around, like, for example, when I grew up, like my dad was not emotional. We didn't talk about anything, there was none of that stuff, which that generation of, just tough it every day and put that, keep pounding it down and putting it, in the big toe of the body. You don't have to deal with, like, when people are around that, and I think, like you said, they're different generations are coming through and that shift is happening. But when you're surrounded, depending, I'm saying maybe say home life, right? If you don't talk about emotions or how you're feeling or something at home, and you go through, your 20s, 30s, you get into the trades, I feel like that carries with you a bit. And I was kind of the same way until I started going to seeing my counselor and psychologist, and it just opens the door to, like you were saying, it doesn't have to be, you need somebody to listen to you. And I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but I feel like when you're around that growing up, or what your experience is, it kind of goes through life. And I don't know what that light switch was or is, but as soon as you do start to, get ways to cope and be able to share something with somebody in an unbiased, safe atmosphere, it's almost like the floodgates open, and it's so relieving.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get to that point if you've just constantly been, surrounded by an environment that doesn't whether allow or accept that,
Quit being a girly man.
Yeah.
All that
Whether
stuff,
whether it's at home, whether it's in the trades, whether it's with your employer, it's just,
You bring up a really good point, and
that might have been a really long approach around that, but
no,
just
you know what? I'll give you credit where it's due. Like, you're very passionate about this. Both of you have created a platform to have some really unique conversations, and it may feel niche. People outside the trades are like, well, what is this? What we're talking about on a broad scale is very universal. This is just through a specific lens, but what you're describing is called modeling. And modeling is one of the most influential behaviors we experience as human beings. If we were to break things down, one of the easiest ways that I do this is generationally. So we have boomers, we have Gen X, we have millennials, and we got Gen Z, Gen Y, Gen Z, and then there's a new one, generation. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I just want to apologize to babies and be like, I don't know what we're bringing you up in, but we'll try to fix it before you grow up. So for those of you who didn't know, boomers are the ones who coined the term workaholic. Okay. They wore it like a badge of honor for their entire career. How many parents, like, we're kind of the same age-ish, but our parents, they're so proud. They're like, I did take a sick day all year, and they wear it like a badge. They get the embroidered, aviation jacket. They're like, I didn't miss a day. They're sick. They have the flu, and they're 6:30 a.m. They're making their coffee and, vibrating themselves to the car, and they're going into work like that and getting everybody sick. But to them, it's like, yes, that was their mentality. They were workaholics, and they were proud of that. So remember that mindset, because they're still here, and they own a lot of these companies now. They moved up. Then you have Gen X. Gen X came along, and they were the what's the term? Key latch kids.
Latchkey kids.
Yes, thank you. So their workaholic parents were gone all the time, were 12s and 14s, and they were left to fend for themselves. And they watched their youth kind of disappear because their parents weren't parenting them or teaching them or spending any time with them. So their rebellious nature was like, well, to heck with that. I want more work-life balance. And Gen X was the one that said, no. We're gonna work a little bit less and actually enjoy our life. So they started tipping the needle. Then you have millennials like me. I'm an elder millennial. And we took that one step further, and we're like, yes, more life-work balance. I do like to flip those terms, by the way. I watched a speaker at a conference earlier this year who said, instead of work-life, call it life-work. And just, that's a nice little mindset shift that I really enjoy.
I like
anyway, yeah. So we took that one step further, and we went, yes, more life-work balance. Plus, we want our benefits to be more robust. We want them to include different things like access to counseling and that sort of thing. And then Gen Z is the most fascinating generation, and they get crapped on a lot for their work ethic, their lazy social media, all the tropes. they took hustle culture and made it an industry. So all of us grew up saying we could be whatever we want. You could be an astronaut, doctor, whatever. None of that was true until Gen Z said, you know what? I love shooting videos. I'm going to monetize it. And they make good money and they inspire others to take their creative whims. And this is just a passionate generation. They're like, I can do whatever I want. Like, what are these? Well, you need a degree for that? Well, why don't I just educate myself and see what happens? And then I'll put myself through school as I'm working in the industry that I want. They're amazing. I'm a big fan of Gen Z. So that's kind of been the progression through the demographics that is a nice way of like kind of framing where we came from and how that behavior that you were just talking about came to be, because modeling is so important. So if you have kids and you are a workaholic, you can think that your kids aren't paying attention, but they absolutely know when you're leaving and walking back through the door. They can see how exhausted you are after a day of work and you're not able to make it to the soccer game. They see how much wine you drink every day with dinner. 2 glasses, Dad had 3 today, every day. You're modeling for them. And this all ties into how we're working. So modeling is so important. And when you have a shop full of people who never miss a day of work, they talk loud, they play hard. That's the culture. That's where you're getting your paycheck too. You're damn right. There's a propensity to fit in and to follow that behavior. And then some of those people, they move on to a different place. Now they're the models. So they're bringing in these workplace habits that we see. And burning question is like, how do we temper that? You're never going to completely stop it, but how do we change the perception of that behavior, where instead of the workaholic gets revered, now we're telling employees, hey, like truckers were one of the first to pioneer this. They could only drive so many hours. And they're mandated to take a break because they were driving themselves to death, like quite literally.
Yeah.
We had to make a law, say like, take a nap. You deserve it. We appreciate you. And that kind of systemic change is what is moving the needle for workplaces now.
Unbelievable. It's really interesting how you say that, because growing up, like my dad, same thing. He was in a boomer. Well, he's in that middle. I'm like in the middle. He's in the middle of that like switch from boomer to Gen X.
Yeah.
But he worked really hard, and my mom passed away when I was 9, and he just worked at Safeway for his whole career, and he'd be up at 4:30 in the morning. He'd be there at 5 and work, 9 hours, come home, and he'd be toast because he was up so early. He'd come home and there'd be nothing there, but then it'd be like, then I'd get that feedback of what he got, right? It was kind of passed down. Well, you need to work hard. You need to, that type of stuff. And then I felt like the stuff that I did or I wanted to do, I was torn because I had these desires, and then I had also this input from my dad and my uncles and everyone in that generation, and how, oh no, it should be like this. And then you're like, well, what the hell do I do? There's probably a lot of that going on. And then these are the people who they're just going through life confused. They don't know what the hell's going on. They don't know that whether it's through trauma or everyone's got trauma, but, like a familial context or anything like that. There's a lot of factors that play into this, and there's a lot of people that are just kind of, I don't know. It reminds me of that Seinfeld bit where he goes into the grocery store and he's like, I don't know, you look healthy. What do you eat? Like there's all these people going around and be like, well, I don't know. Is this normal? Like, do you find that a lot? Like people are just like, wow, I never realized that was a problem until you talked about it. And now, or I never knew how to like deal with how I was feeling until you talked about it. Is that pretty common?
Oh yeah. Can I just say, if to whoever you are, we're all just out here winging it, my friend.
Exactly.
Every one of us is just winging it, and we're trying to figure it out. And we spend a lot of time talking about like I'm on my journey and my self journey. But like humankind is like a truly collective um, being. And we think, for example, we think of mental health as like an individual issue. Like my mental health is low. I struggle with anxiety or depression, or I have ADHD or whatever it may be. That feels like a me problem. The truth is mental health is as universal and community driven as you can imagine. For example, if I was to walk into this interview with a bad attitude, smug face, and standoffish sort of demeanor, absolutely you will pick up on that, and you'll be like, who's this guy? Well, I'm affecting you. We affect each other all the time. And absolutely, if we look at mental health as like a community issue rather than an individualistic one, it really blows all the walls down to go like, hey, yeah, like, you know what, even through a selfish lens, if you can support someone in your workplace who is dragging their heels, they're missing deadlines, they're not producing, they're not picking up the slack when you need them to, and if you recognize that this person's struggling, rather than F this person, they're in my way, they're not, that completely changes the conversation. Even though like in the back of your mind you're like, well, this will benefit me if I just help this person. The whole point is that that person gets help and you've empowered them and uplifted them. So it's kind of like the dirty underlayer of mental health. It's like you can do it compassionately. You can think it's the right thing, and it is. And you can be compassionate and do it in a loving way. But there's this selfish piece to this too, and it can improve your life to help somebody else too. So my mom worked at IGA for years as a single mom. And like the story you just told me, I completely relate to. She'd work 4 to midnight, and I'd be either up late watching cartoons, or I still remember like her work smell. She came through the door, she's exhausted. And she's like, why aren't you in bed? Did you make your lunch? And they worked so hard. And it's important to recognize that hard work is a virtue. Being a hard worker, that's something to be proud of. I'm not ripping on hard workers, but there is a point where it's a virtue to take care of yourself and to enjoy life and to model that for your children too. Model it for your coworkers. If you're a foreman, if you're in a leadership position and you take time off, tell your work and tell your team, hey, I'm going on a fishing trip this weekend. Yeah, cool. Yeah, the boss can be away, but I really need this. And my position can be super stressful sometimes. I can't wait to go sit in that boat with nothing in my ears. And I love you guys, but I need to disconnect and just wait. I'm going to come back. My cup's going to be fuller. That's the kind of modeling where we're promoting self-care in the workforce from leadership down. Mm-hmm. And because it's tough for employees, we're at the bottom of the totem pole. If we don't feel safe speaking up, we won't, and we'll either burn out or quit. And that's sort of the stigma that we need to overcome. And there's so many different ways to do that.
It's interesting. Like day one of Management 101, it's like your employees make you money, so take care of your employees.
They're your asset.
Mm-hmm. Right? And it's so why I don't understand why people aren't like, do they?
There's a disconnect between that.
How do they not understand that? If these people weren't in these walls of yours, you wouldn't be making any money. So why wouldn't you want to?
Nailed it.
Why wouldn't you want to take care of them, and then they're more productive? Like it's more money for you. If you from a selfish job, like a selfish boss standpoint, yeah. Let's say like if you have a really selfish boss and you don't know how to pitch it, this whole mental health, like advocacy. Maybe do that. Hey, you could probably make way more money if your employees were happy.
But they'd be losing employees for a day or two, and maybe that generation, boomers, were down employees, were not making money, right? Or that, because it should be quite simple. You look after your employees will be more productive, they'll be more efficient, and
100%.
Right? That's just
both of you are just hitting dingers right now. Just like, yes, I want to like pause on.
But those that's like textbook what we've been
It's
taught.
Yeah.
But how do you
Management
implement that
1000,
in the actual real world, and I guess more specifically in the trades?
Yeah.
Okay. God, where do I start? So I deal with business owners all the time, owners and HR and like whoever's looking to implement some kind of wellness initiative, or they're trying to, train their employees or whatever. That's when I have these conversations. And they're all there. Everybody's got a different lens. So some employers are the virtuous ones, and they're like, hey, we want to stay up with the times. We want to empower our workforce and keep training them and giving them supports and everything. Cool. That's person A. Person B is the selfish person. So maybe an old tenured boss who's like, yeah, my turnover is really high. I don't get it. And we unpack, kind of what their work culture is like and everything, and go, okay, well, like there's a lot of instances of burnouts, and looking through your EFAP, your benefits stats, you have employees accessing short-term disability disproportionately to the industry, that sort of thing. So now we're looking at, stats and dollars and cents. That's person two. Okay. That they care about metrics. And absolutely, that's a different conversation. Here's how addressing mental health in the workplace can affect your bottom line, like positively. And then there's folks who are in between who just don't understand like how one affects the other. Because you're right, you touched on it. You're like, well, if they're not here, they're not making me money. So what you're saying is send them home if they're not feeling well, so I can not make money, but I'll make more money. And they don't understand the math. So that's a more in-depth conversation. And unfortunately, it's really hard to study direct correlation between, and there are studies that prove and support this, but I'll be frank, it's really hard to get like a direct metric if you're with that type A person who's like, show me the stats. We can show you over a long period of time what a healthy workplace will do. And the other person is ego. Okay. So they want to look good. They want their place of employment to be up with the times. They want to put a badge on their door saying, we support mental health. I got time for those people too. And you know why? Because all I care about are their employees. I don't care how we get there. All I care about is that they sign that strategy consultation, that piece that I give them, and I help them implement it, and their employees are better. So I don't care if it's about this person's ego. I don't care if it's about their selfish lens. However we get there is irrelevant to me. I have conversations in all of those arenas, right? And but you opened up a floodgate for a lot of different tangents there, but it's been an interesting experience working in this field, working with different workplaces. I don't just work in the trades. I have a trades background, so I have a passion for clients who are trades based, and they're exploring this, because I give them a lot of props for even kicking tires on wellness initiatives. But I work with everybody from law firms to travel agencies, fire departments, EMS, schools, and they all have a different worldview. In the trades, it's tougher work. It's a different conversation to convince people that, yeah, this is really beneficial. I think when I share my story and I talk about, being the flaky employee and calling in sick, that resonates. I was a great machinist. I don't mind saying that. I was very good at my job. I took a lot of pride in it. And I also felt terrible when I couldn't perform and when I had to call in sick. So that's not to make me look good, but there are a lot of employees out there who really care. And what happened to me happened to me. It's not something that I choose. I don't choose to have depressive episodes. I don't choose to have anxiety after 2.5 days, no sleep. That's not my choice. That's like you broke your leg and you're expected to go play soccer. Like, what are you doing? Use the other one. Oh, okay. That's not a real thing. So like a lot of this isn't people's choice, and it's being augmented and accented by how much pressure there is in everyday life. We just went through COVID, you guys. 2 years of trauma straight. everyone. And what have we done to like unpack how that affected people, how it affected kids, how people are fighting for hybrid work models now? We're just hoping that we could just keep moving forward, and that's not healthy either. So if, it's important to talk to your workforce and be like, how are you doing? Like, actually, like, are you stressed about money because inflation's through the roof? So that $1.50 raise isn't really doing much. In fact, it feels kind of insulting. Absolutely, that affects people's mental health. It affects how they show up to work and perform for you. So there's lots of different ways to frame it, I think, for employers.
And just because they're at work doesn't mean they're like working to capacity. Doesn't mean that they're working effectively, efficiently.
Exactly.
That you're getting the most out of them. Like I tell you, I have an anxiety disorder and I have ADHD. And on the days that I'm low, you think I'm very efficient? Heck no.
And how does it make you feel? Like you don't want to?
I don't want to be that guy.
Exactly.
I want to do well. Like I have to I'm a teacher now, so I got to put a brave face on, and thank God I'm medicated, and I go to therapy. I just came from therapy, a couple hours before we started this. I saw my counselor today, and all those tools in my toolbox, really my wellness toolbox, really do help. So I think that's my next question. Like, let's just frame it as, okay, I'm a journeyman or I'm an apprentice somewhere, and I'm in this place, and I know something's not right. I'm feeling down. I'm calling in sick every once in a while, like you were mentioning. Things aren't really right, but I know that, if I call in sick again, or if I open up to this guy or gal who's a journey person who's supposed to be my mentor, and I open up and I share with them these troubles I'm having, I'm worried I'm just going to be, called a B or like man up or whatever.
Yeah.
What do I do?
Yep, that's a really good question. Okay,
because I think there's a lot of people out there that are there right now, whether they're a journeyman or they're a tenured or whatever, and they're just in a place like you mentioned. There's a lot of workforces that are the workforce culture that is, they're not open depending on where what generation people come from. But if they're sitting there and they're they're having trouble sleeping or they know something's wrong, what do I do?
Great question. Okay, we'll start here. Everybody deals with mental health. We have good days, we have bad days. 100% of people can relate to showing up to work. You don't want to be there. Your mind's not in it. So keep that in mind. The second piece is the safety bit. So
yeah,
there's so many dynamics at play. So like in your scenario, you're kind of up against it. Maybe there's a couple strikes against you from, the calling in sick standpoint. You're an apprentice. So chances are you're low on the hierarchy in that place of employment. So you kind of feel confined to stay in your lane. And three, maybe you've been able to observe the culture and your mentor specifically enough to know that, maybe they made a bunch of jokes about mental health. They're kind of, you have a sense that like this may not be the best person to have this conversation with. So we'll set the stage there. And you're like, what the heck do I do? So one, it's important to recognize all of those things. So really take a hard look at the environment. And if you see cracks in someone in a good way, so the person who's making the jokes or whatever, but you kind of get the sense that they're doing it self-protectively, that might be an individual who is protecting themselves. So you actually might have more in common than you think. Now, the next question is, well, how do I break through that first barrier and get real with this person? It could be really hard, and you have to use your gut instinct to know whether or not it's worth bringing it up with that individual. So I'm working my way towards the person that you can talk to. You got a couple strikes against you at work. There is a resiliency piece here that I want to speak to, and as compassionate as I am to everyone's challenges, it's important to take inventory of your own level of resiliency. And that is a skill and a trait that we can build and we can work out. It's like building muscle. We can become more resilient, and we can have instances that break us down to make us less resilient. We're more vulnerable. So that is fluid. Okay. So if you don't feel safe bringing it up directly to your workplace, and it's a big enough place that has maybe an HR department, or you have an EFAP, and there's a number that you can call anonymously, I would recommend that avenue first. And you're kind of going in the back door, but that's why it's there. Now, that only makes sense if you're in a big workforce and they have that robust HR support and that sort of thing. That would be your safe bet. If you're in a small place, like the majority of those shops that I worked at didn't have HR. We, it was just owner operated kind of thing. If you don't feel safe doing it at work, then you need to have that conversation outside of work. And that means accessing your own personal counselor, lean on your network of friends, and to manage your challenge so that you can be more consistent at work, so that you show up more. So you're working and you're coming away, and then you're doing a little bit more work. You're working on yourself. You're hitting those sessions, feeling empowered. You're getting a better sleep, and you're trying to put a string together 2-3 weeks of positive behavior that's reflected on you from a work standpoint. Then you have something to go to your employer with, to say, hey, last month called in sick twice. I wanted to address this. This month, I haven't missed a day I've been here, and I want to tell you why. So last month, I was really dealing with some stuff, and I know, I was calling in sick, but really, I didn't feel safe at work. I was tired, but I couldn't do it, and I'm really sorry that I wasn't totally upfront with you. I wasn't sure that I could be, but what I did is I went talked to a few people. I've been sleeping better. I kind of worked out this challenge that was affecting me. And I just want you to be aware of like those two windows. So yeah, I was a little bit flaky. I'll admit that, I own that, but I really put an effort in these last 3-4 weeks to be here. That's maybe one of the safest ways that you can broach that conversation sort of retroactively to give your employer context. So one, they might respect you for your honesty and go, yeah, you know what? I wasn't going to bring it up. I was just kind of watching to see if you messed up again. But thanks for giving me advice, like giving me context on your behavior. And I did notice that you've been here more and your work productivity's picked up. The next thing you say is, sometimes I deal with challenges like this. The next time it happens, I don't want to skirt around it. Can I just come to you and maybe we can work something out where I could take a couple hours off a week if I'm dealing with something? I got this. I'm recently diagnosed with ADHD, and it's this new medication I'm on. I just want to let you know, like, it's not going to affect me too much, but maybe a little bit. And you start to like weasel your way into that conversation, and you're building that compassion piece. You're meeting them halfway because you're acknowledging as an employer that they need you at work, they need you productive, and you've recognized that you're not living up to your employee contract. Because there's a responsibility for employees too. An employer hires you and has an expectation, and you agree to meet those expectations. So it's okay to be preliminary, like preemptive with that talk, but it's not an easy situation. I'm not saying this will work every time. You do have to advocate for yourself. Number one, you have to take care of yourself. If you're working in a toxic workplace, just remember that there are 8 billion people on Earth, and a lot of them are employed, and there are other jobs out there. So if your job is reducing your ability to live happily, that's a conversation that you should have with you and people close to you too. So you don't have to feel like you have to stay all the time. It could be a process to get out of toxic workplaces, but it's not impossible.
I think that's interesting when you talk about toxic workplaces and how you don't have to stay. There are other options, because I think there's a big pressure. Like I always remember hearing my, advice from guidance counselors and my parents or whatever, it's like, make sure you have another job lined up. Or even like even my stepmom, like they're from the old school. Like my stepmom's like 75, and her son is a very accomplished accountant who's been constantly headhunted, constantly hit. So he could go work anywhere, whenever he wants. And so he'll be working for a couple of years, and then he's like, I think I'm just gonna go try this out now. But or this job, this place is pretty toxic. I don't really like it. I'm gonna go here because he knows he can. He's skilled. They want him, but she can't wrap her mind around that. Like, why would you go? You have a good job. You have a this and that, And so that's got to be tough for some people to just cut bait and get out of there. Like, obviously have something lined up, but just
if you can, absolutely.
Yeah. But also, even if you don't, sometimes it's the healthiest thing to just go.
It's messy. Like, let's be real.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't black and white. I'm not just saying like, oh, if you don't like a job, just quit. And like, I don't know, you'll figure it out. Like, have I done that? For sure. Was it super stressful? For sure. But there's context. Everyone's life looks different. We got bills to pay. Sometimes we have to endure, and try to find those windows where we can line something up great. I'm talking in extreme cases, you may be better off.
Of course, yeah.
Having that 8-hour day to go get some resumes out, and like, it may be so detrimental to your health. I have worked in shops that were so toxic and just overrun with egregious behavior. I've quit, and I was paycheck to paycheck, straight up. It was terrifying. It may not have been the best decision, even in hindsight, but never discount your options. Going back to my story, when I felt like I had no options, it was the most hollow feeling I can imagine. And a lot of us take pride in our work. We want to contribute. We do, like, inherently. And if we don't feel like we're contributing, we diminish ourselves and our self-worth. And it's all tied into the same sort of thing. So to be clear, it's not crystal clear.
No, yeah.
You have to use your context and have your wits about you.
And if you're accomplished, say you're a journey person, you've got 10, 15 years in, and, you're starting to realize or be aware that you're in a toxic environment, to be able to leave, or if you're headhunted, like in your example there, Rosie, it's easier to maybe go somewhere if, people are aware. But when you're starting out, you're an apprentice, or maybe you don't feel comfortable on where your skill sets are at, might be a bit harder to be like, I need to get out of this environment and go somewhere else. But I don't know if I'm there yet, like that, I guess that self-confidence in your own skills to be able to just say, I need to get out of this toxic environment and go somewhere. I'm sure there's a lot of inner fight trying to decide, between toxic environment, or do I need to grind it out for another year or two and, build myself up and learn some more stuff so that I can, be comfortable moving somewhere and be confident in my skill sets, so that I can, go somewhere and be a good employee and show them that, where my skill sets are.
Yeah, there is a place for you out there that you'll fit. I want to add one more thing too. If you're at your breaking point, regardless of industry, that kind of gives you permission to speak freely. So don't forget that. So before you just quit, you can ask for change. You can ask for support. What have you got to lose? If they completely reject you, then that just validates your decision, and you're going to walk away and probably be twice as inspired to find a healthier workplace. Or they look at you and go, oh, I wish you told me sooner. Yeah, this individual's been really problematic. You're like the fourth person to complain about their behavior. That's only if you're at that fight or flight part. It does give you permission to kind of speak freely. So, but it's not an easy situation to be in. I'm glad you guys brought it up, because it's something I think a lot of people face. is they're unhappy, or they're dealing with hidden challenges, those invisible disabilities, and they just don't know where to start. Maybe they don't have practice articulating what they're feeling. As a guy, I was really fortunate growing up. My two best friends were girls in junior high, and the three of us, we'd skip school and go to McDonald's or food court or whatever, and they would just chat about guys they liked and teachers they hated and how they feel, and talked about, this is what I was exposed to as a young boy. So then I go to hockey practice. You're like, how are we feeling, boys? And they're like, itchy. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, the old jocks riding up. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And so it's important. It goes back to that modeling piece. But if you don't have practice articulating how you're feeling, it can feel impossible. Like, no blame given. Like, if you don't know what it's like, how would you know?
Yeah. And it's easier for some people, like myself. I love it.
You're a wordsmith.
I'm my wife and I joke, I'm the more, I've said this on the show, I think before, I'm the more like cliche woman of our relationship. Like I talk about how I'm feeling. I love going to see a counselor. It's easy for me. I go there. If something comes up in my life that I need to deal with, whether that's past traumas or stress or whatever, I just dive in. I just love it.
Yeah.
But then she jokes how she's the cliche man. She needs time to process, and she needs to, it's pretty funny how we work, but it's easier for some people. And I've had to learn in my life, I can't just railroad and expect everyone to be that way either, right? Like I can't go in to my workplace if I was working in a shop, let's say, and be like, go to my boss and be like, we need to do this and blah, 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 blah. Because it might be someone who thinks that's, way out in left field, or very uncomfortable, or we got to really consider where people are coming from and what they bring to the table and what baggage they have, and be compassionate to that too, right?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. Yeah. Yeah, not everybody's like us, my friend. And I wasn't even always like this.
I friggin' love it, man.
It took me quite a while.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of prodding from my wife, who's also a psychologist. And, you got to be able to, the communication part, whether it's in a relationship or a work, I guess at work, where you're having to communicate with your boss, an employee, a colleague. That I think that's being in the schools. That's definitely a learned skill that is probably almost front and foremost for, being a good communicator in any atmosphere.
It took practice, right?
It does, a lot of practice.
I don't know why I laughed so hard there at the prodding by your wife there. I don't know why.
I needed it, obviously. It's just I was not really much of a talker, and especially with emotions and feelings, because I just modeling now, looking at that, after hearing some of the terminology and experiences, like probably the modeling side, I just, put it to the side. But then it gets to a point where you almost are at that boiling point. And, if you've got kids or you're a spouse, you start to maybe get a little bit heated, and, start your patience level drops, and you start treating your kids different. Like there's a whole bunch of factors now that putting all that to the side, now these little triggers, I guess, can just explode. And if you could talk through it, whether it's, with, like you said, your close network of friends, psychologist, all that stuff can, help give you, I guess, tools to cope with this stuff, because it is tricky. And you mentioned COVID, and personally, I feel like we're getting to a point where people are almost on that cusp of, the ones that have been grinding it out for, the whole COVID experience, whether working at home, hybrid, whatnot. I get a feeling like there's a lot of people who are almost at their bottom. They've given it so many years of this, and, put that maybe face on, work through stuff, grinding it out. And I feel like we're almost on that tipping point. Maybe colleagues, and even just in kind of general, where people are just tired. There's a lot of people, I feel like we're almost ready for Christmas break, and we're not even halfway through the semester. I don't know what that is, but I mean, everybody has their things going on. And it's just, this whole mental health is, looking after yourself is a lot easier said than done, but it's necessary.
And you don't, don't think you have to do it all yourself either. Like the hardest thing that I deal with is asking for help. I'm terrible at it. It is the focal point of like 80% of my counseling sessions is asking. I have a huge network. I am like really blessed with, I'm close with my family. I have some amazing, diverse friends who are, thankfully, they offer to help, and I'll still turn them down because I'm like, I don't have to bother you with this. Like, I got to be able to. I just need to have a good sleep. Like, that's a me problem. But to have somebody just to mention it and just be like, you know what, I haven't slept right in like 2 weeks, like 4 or 5 hours a night, and it's really hard. Just telling someone that you trust, like, just it's such a relief.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all, that you could just leave it there. But to have somebody know is just, it's empowering. It's fantastic. And
Just to feel heard in that way, right?
to feel heard as well.
Which might give you more confidence in your coping mechanism to get through what, you mentioned your guitars and music, everybody, tapping into that stuff that brings you joy and that can bring you out of a slump or, I'm very much, I can tie into that music. I got music in the shop going all the time. I feel like I need music sometimes to keep me going, keep me happy. I find whether, I don't care if I know the music or the song, whatever, but, and I think everybody has something, whether they're at work or whatever, whether they're running, they're exercising. But for me personally, music is huge. And sometimes my wife doesn't really, she's like, oh, I want some silence. I'm like, I just want some mellow, reggae music or whatever. I just need something to kind of mellow it out. And yeah, I don't know. Everybody's got different coping mechanisms that they can tap into to kind of help with, whether it's their network of friends or they're by themselves.
You brought up a great point about music, and I use music as a vehicle in the mental health work that I do, and how I use it is to help with that articulation piece, that practice piece, where an individual might not know where to start when it comes to talking about what they're going through or how they're feeling. Music has always been able to say the things that I haven't been able to say. And I think everyone has hopped in the car after a tough day, and you've put on Offspring Smash, or you've put on Metallica, or you've put on John Mayer, or whatever it may be. And John Mayer is just saying what you're feeling, and you have it cranked, and you're like, yes. Using music as a catalyst to help get the wheels turning, get the words out, is a fantastic exercise. So I host men's groups called Boys Night Out, and we did them virtually throughout COVID. And that was a thing that you credit to the guys who were there, and said, like, I don't even know where to start. And I said, well, like, what song do you listen to when you're just amped? Like, you're just, like, you had a day. What's the song you crank? And this one guy was like, Master Puppets. I'm like, great. So I brought up the lyrics and I played the song, and we started unpacking him through the song. And he's like, yeah, this part. And I'm like, yeah, like, what does that feel like for you? He's like, well, I feel it in my chest. I'm like, that's your heart pounding, And we would just use music as a stepping point to have these conversations. There's some lyrics that you hear that you're just like November Rain was one that they used to really get to me. Now the lyrics escaping me. Standing in November Rain. God, anyway, it's a terrible example, but that was one that always used to resonate with me.
Yeah.
As a young guy, right? I'm just like, I feel what he's saying. So I would, if someone asked me how I was feeling, I might get a little poetic. I might quote a song or something, just so I can kind of get the in out a little bit quicker.
That's what I was trying to say prior to you break. That felt like I was a little
That
wishy-washy.
we broke up for a sec.
Yeah.
Sorry, but I came back.
No. Sometimes it's sometimes my wife picks up all these different, the lyrics and that stuff. And sometimes for me, it's just almost the beats and the music, not necessarily the singing. I don't catch on a lot of that stuff, but I don't know. And to each their own, right? It's just something that puts me, that either calms me down or just kind of I get level over, on that quick drive home from work or on a road trip, or I go run and just blast something just to almost maybe mute everything out and just kind of, I don't know.
What do you listen to in shop class? Do you have the radio on, or is that allowed?
I've got Apple Music, so I've got some of my own playlists, classic rock, country. I don't do a lot of the hip hop and rap because I think it's garbage and it's hard to find clean stuff nowadays. But a little bit of everything. I like to kind of play a mix and give the kids kind of a little bit of something of my stuff, but then I also don't mind some newer stuff that they're into.
Do they kind of offer their own? They're like, hey, can you play like the?
Sometimes I'll ask them, hey, what do you want to listen today? I'm like, oh, this. Okay, go throw the CD
I have
on.
a CD. Oh, yeah.
Well, I guess not digital.
A CD.
What year was this?
No, this is not CD.
Oh, this is when you were in
the
high
cassette.
School? Yeah. Oh, the cassette. Yeah, 8-track. Yeah.
Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah. Born in the
Born
USA.
in the USA.
Born in the USA. Yeah. Great album.
No, I have an aux cord, and they plug in. Is it clean? Yep. All right, let's go.
Okay.
And then they just play whatever they want.
That's cool. Like, who doesn't love that feeling too, especially for young people? Who doesn't love, telling everybody, hey, listen to this song. Just shut up, and listen. Like, feels good, right? So,
and you find some good music I have some sweet music that I've never heard.
Classical.
The kids know.
Yeah.
They know the good stuff.
Yeah.
And so then they'll see, all of a sudden they look up and they see their shop teacher doing the Angus from AC/DC trot across the stage, across the shop.
Amazing.
And they're like, what is going on? And I just love rocking out with them. It's so fun.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, it's music and math, right? Are two universal languages. Mm-hmm. I was never a math kid. Give me music all day. But it's a great way to, set the tone. You can set the tone for, in our shop, we'd listen to K97, which is the classic rock station up here. And it was for all the old timers, right? And you'd hear freaking Leonard Skinner like 9 times a day, and they're loving it, right? And they're welding away and like having a great time. And then you have the younger generation, my generation, we put on some Nirvana or Offspring or something, and they'd kind of roll their eyes, but like we'd be vibing, right? So it's give and take, but music has a way of like calming us or validating us. Mm-hmm. And it's lyrically, it's cool to unpack some lyrics, and you're like, oh, I like the way I feel that, I like the way that was said.
We got a question for you. What place does boundaries have in this whole thing? Because I just coming on, I just went to counseling today, and we were talking about boundaries, and I realized that in my interactions with certain people in my life, I'm allowing my boundaries to stretch or change to appease someone else. Right, to appease whatever, and boundaries can take all sorts of, like they can take all sorts of forms, as far as whether it's workplace boundaries, whether it's in the workplace, I'm not going to laugh at that joke, or no, I'm not going to work Sunday or Saturday because I need that time, or whatever it is. In your experience, what does a lack of boundaries, or just boundaries in general, where does that play into all this?
Well, as a reformed people pleaser, I'll tell you what.
I love it. I love reformed. That's 100%.
Dude,
I get it.
That was my life. That was the mask I wore.
Yeah.
So that people would like me, because I had this secret, right? It felt like I was living 2 lives. Mm-hmm. So I would appease everybody, just so that, 1, I didn't have to talk about me, but 2, I wanted to be liked, because I didn't like myself. So, do I still people please sometimes? 100%, absolutely. I don't think it ever goes away, especially if you have like a bit of a bleeding heart, and I love people. Like, I don't have to know you to care about you. So yeah, I do overextend, but I had to learn boundaries, and it was hard. There's some people who are really good at it, like narcissists, for example. Fantastic with boundaries. Either they have none, or if you cross them, you will be like cut out of their lives, right? But we don't want to go that far. So creating healthy boundaries takes practice. You're going to screw it up a couple times. Something you'll say will be taken the wrong way, or you come off too harsh, or whatever. But so that event happens, and it's what you do with it after, what you do with that information. So you made somebody maybe feel bad because you set a boundary, like in a relationship or something. You're like, I do not ever want to talk about my dad. Maybe they had and your partner's like, oh, I didn't mean to offend you. Now I feel bad. And there's this dynamic. So you set a boundary and it's kind of going sideways. That's going to happen sometimes, but it's what you do with that information. You can always correct any boundary. The most important thing that I had to do was, one, recognize that I was completely people pleasing and I was exhausting myself. And I would say yes to I was the go-to. People could lean on me. I was always there. I took pride in that. But I was exhausted. I would take phone calls late at night from friends who were going through something. I would never let the call go through, to voicemail and say like, hey, I'm just heading to bed. Can we talk about this tomorrow? That can be a boundary you set. It's imperfect, but it's totally doable and it's really beneficial. The side effect of setting boundaries that I didn't even realize existed until I started doing it was that I think people respect you more. I think human nature is to, once we get a little bit from someone, we kind of want to see if they have a little bit more to give, and not in a malicious way. I think that's just how we are. How much more value can they add to my life? How much more can I lean on this person? And you're kind of testing your relationship with them. I think that's a natural thing that we do. And I've recognized when I've done that with people and I've, over asked or asked too much. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, geez, I'm sorry. Like I wasn't trying to be. The side effect of setting boundaries is that I think people respect you for them. Generally speaking, I think they'll look at your ability and your courage to kind of advocate for yourself and speak up. And they'll go, yeah, okay. And you can add in all the addendums and caveats that you need to, and be like, just today, I can't be there for you. I'm really sorry. And, I hope you call Jen or Greg or whatever. I wish it could be me, but I've had like a brutal day and my cup's so low. I need to take care of myself and I love you, but like, oof, let's pick it up tomorrow, maybe. So you can add suggestions to soften the boundary, but advocating for yourself, it's a really healthy behavior.
Well, no one else is going to.
You're 100% right, my friend.
No one else is going to advocate for you. Like everyone's too busy dealing with their own crap.
Yeah, we're all going through it, right?
And they're not going to say, oh, you know what, Lance, you should probably take a day to, you look kind of stressed out. You should probably take a day and not make me money for a day. And no one else.
I mean, your employer may or may not. Like times are changing.
No, my employer, I work for a good school division. So do you.
Cool.
And they, mental health is a big thing. But still, everywhere needs work, right?
Absolutely.
But even if you work in a good place like that, you still need to advocate for yourself. They're not going to force you to take a mental health day. Right?
And what's the worst that could happen? So my brain always goes to the worst case scenario.
Answer the what ifs. Answer the what ifs.
Answer the what if. Like, do you have to give it credence? I'm of two minds about it, right? Some people advocate that like, don't listen to that stupid voice. Like, just do your thing. And I'm like, I don't know. Maybe it brings up a good point. I'll listen to it, but again, it's what do I do with that information? Do I have to act on it? No, that's up to me. But what's the worst that can happen when you advocate for yourself? You were honest with yourself. You probably tried to be as fair as you could. Probably stumbled over your words, trying to be compassionate. None of that's bad. The reaction of the other individual or parties involved has nothing to do with you.
Exactly.
You tried your best to advocate for yourself.
You can't control that.
You'll sleep great. Believe me. And, people will react how they react. Sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative. But at that point, once the information has been given to them, once that boundary has been set, that your hands are clean.
It's out of your hands.
People will do with that what they want. And it can feel bad for sure. It can, leave a loose end untied or whatever it may be. But it's important to go like, I did it right for me, and I'll work with the fallout, after. And chance there may not be any fallout anyway. So, but it takes practice, and you can always apologize. You can always explain. They're like, hey, I'm new to this boundary thing as a people pleaser. Can I tell you something? Can I try this out on you?
And you're modeling when you're doing that, right? You're showing them that being on a mental health journey or whatever it is, it's okay. And you're admitting, but you're showing them that it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to struggle, and it's okay to try to figure your crap out by you doing it, right? You're modeling 100%.
Yeah. And you know what? People have a lot of respect for anybody who just tries. I'm a big try hard, right? I'll try anything twice. And who doesn't admire that in somebody? So you can go first and just be like, I'm not very good at this, but like I just know that I can't today. And like I want to tell you, I can't even get the words out right now. I know you need me, but I can't right now. I'll tell you, I'm gonna try to figure it out. I'm working through it. So yeah, the humility piece is a big part of it. Don't expect yourself to be perfect at communicating. It takes practice. Don't expect too much of yourself. A lot of people think quite highly of themselves in the sense that they want to present the best version of themselves. That's a virtue. That's a great thing to exist with. But you have to be humble about it and be like, it's not gonna go right all the time, and that's okay. When it does, we'll celebrate. When it doesn't, I'll circle back and I'll try again. That kind of thing.
Yeah. So as we wrap up here, Kris, we typically end the show with a few questions. Again, we're always focusing on trades and building, and we're going to try and meld these into the mental health side. So and then we might have talked about this, so it could be a little bit of a recap. But if somebody is, some advice for somebody that's going through, a difficult time with their mental health at work, what advice do you have for that person?
Take inventory of yourself. It's going to empower you. I use the term inventory not facetiously because we're talking about workplaces, but it's like really valuable data. And it may, before you begin, you're like, I don't want to look inwards too much. I just know I feel bad. But if you're able to like scrape away at a little bit of the why and like just how bad or how good or how indifferent you feel, having that piece of information is like your first foothold. So you're like, aha, this is where I get to work from in every conversation, in every piece that I share about what I'm going through. I at least know where I'm at. And sometimes a great way to do that is to talk to a trusted friend. So you got that ride or die. You got somebody in your network that you're like, okay, I got to bounce this off you. You talk it out a little bit. You have practice. And then you have a piece to go to work with. The worst feeling to have is you walk into work and like you don't know where you're at. And you have that feeling like, I don't even know how I feel. It's really unnerving. That's not the time to begin. So I mean, look at yourself a little bit. Be like, okay, this is how I'm feeling, for sure. And then it builds confidence. So you have that little bit of empowerment piece. But it does depend on your workplace. We know the trades can be traditionally like a tough place to be vulnerable and open, and we're working on that. But there's something to be said for the universality of like everybody goes through stuff and deals with it. Some they don't say a word and they push through it their whole lives. They've still gone through stuff. They will still, in a primal way, like understand that, like, oh yeah, I went through some stuff too. And so don't forget that, like we say, you are not alone. That's a big mental health mantra that we share. The cynic in me is like, cool, like what do I do with that? Like I feel super alone right now. Thanks, tips.
Yeah.
But if you reframe it a little bit and you're like, no, like everyone in this workplace has dealt with, they felt all like humiliated, sad, joyful. Everyone on earth, those big feelings, everyone has experienced. So it's like, how do I get there with the person that I need to talk to, whether it's your manager or your boss or a coworker or whatever? You can start with that comfort of knowing that, like, on some level they'll get it. It's just like, this individual that I have to communicate with has a certain flavor and I've got my flavor. How do we mix our flavors? How do we make tiger ice cream together? Because those flavors shouldn't go together, like Christian orange.
But they do, and
but they do.
A side note, I love tiger ice cream. Thank you for bringing that up.
Love tiger.
Yes.
Love
so are you
tiger.
Are you a Hawaiian pizza guy?
Yes,
Yeah,
I am.
You know I am. Of course
Yeah,
I am.
of course you are.
Of course
Come on.
I am.
Tiger ice cream and Hawaiian pizza. That's if you ever come down here, we ever meet you in person, that's what we're gonna have.
That'll be we need to complete the trifecta. I think we need
something else.
Like a vegetable or something. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
But something to balance it out. I'm with you though. If I see tiger ice cream on an ice cream truck or something, it's like 2 scoops, please.
Yeah.
Because I don't go out and buy it, but when it's in my possession, I love it. So yeah, the communication piece that you spoke about a long time ago is really the foundation of a lot of the work that I do. And when I support small businesses or I'm supporting HR, I talk about communication. I liken it to the 5 love languages, if you're familiar.
Yeah.
And I envy the people who do the quiz, and they come out with like 1, and they're like, that's totally me. And I did the quiz, and I'm like all of them.
Yeah.
To some degree.
I have a lot of work to do.
Well, so that's one way to interpret it.
Yeah.
I looked at it differently, and I'm like, I think it's kind of a virtue that I'm able to express and receive in pretty much every love language. I'm like, that's kind of a superpower in a way, because I'm adaptable. I'm comfortable, dealing with anybody who needs this or that. Like, my antenna is always up. I'm very aware, and communication is a lot the same way. That was a terrible sentence for all you English professors out there listening. It was a lot. It was a lot. But all that to say, I think we think of our communication style, like think about your communication style. If you had to, you're like, I'm the direct one, or like, no, I like to give compliment sandwiches to make sure everybody's happy. Whatever your communication style is, forget it. Doesn't really matter, because the most effective communicator is an adaptable one. And when you go first and you meet a person in their communication style, you're like, okay, this person's really direct, so I can be pretty frank. I should be pretty frank with this person. That's what they like. That's what they're into. When you're comfortable with that, you will make a lot of headway in expressing yourself and making the other party comfortable with what you have to express. And it just generally makes life a lot easier. So in a workplace setting, know your audience. If they're not safe, you don't have to go there. You find a different avenue and you focus on getting what you want. If you need support, if you need time off, you've done that inventory. You're like, this is literally what I need. Now I need to explain it in a way that makes sense, in a way that will be conducive to my health and well-being. And just step by step, and you chip away. And that motivating piece will buy you time too. It's important to say that too. When you're lost and flailing, time stands still. And you're like, I'm not getting anywhere. 10 years go by in a job you hate. That happens. But when you're motivated by progress, you're like, okay, I've done my inventory. Okay, I've figured out who I need to talk to. Okay, I've thought about what they're like. Step 1, step 2, step 3, you're making progress. It feels good and it gets you there. So that would be the advice I would give, kind of if you're stuck in limbo.
So now, this one may be a tricky one. We talk about, skill sets that are important to develop getting into this particular area. I guess we need to reframe that as maybe, what are some, I don't know,
tools for your toolbox, mental health toolbox, maybe.
I guess technical skill sets and toolbox. Now, yeah, what are some tools for your mental health toolbox that you can use to cope, deal with
skills,
these, skills that you can use to better yourself and, pull you out of a rut, so to speak?
I hate this term, but I'll say it anyway. Self-care. It's important.
Mm-hmm.
I reframe it in my own mind. I don't even use it on myself. I think it's overused and it's kind of diminished what it means. What hasn't diminished is how important it is
Mm-hmm.
to take care of yourself. What that looks like is unique to you.
Mm-hmm.
Rule number 1, don't listen to anybody else's self-care routine. You take their information, their suggestions, and you make your own self-care routine. I will say this much. I like a hot bath after a long day. I do. I put Epsom salts in, some bubbles. I put the hockey game on the iPad on the chair next to the tub, and I chill.
Down here, we
And
call that the toilet.
I got a beer or the toilet. If it's that close to the tub, though, you probably live in a place like mine. So, like a 900 square foot, two bedroom apartment. But, a hot bath, because I am terrible at relaxing. So I've thought about myself. And I'm like, I'm really not that good at self-care. But what brings me calmness and what brings me joy? I do like a hot bath. I like to chill because I'm in the bathroom. Like nothing bad can happen. Somebody knocks on the door, I'm not getting up. The phone rings into the other room, I'm not getting it. So like my brain relaxes and my legs and my upper torso is freezing, but my legs are happy. My tub's pretty small.
You have a tub outside, do you? Is it snowing?
No, I went. Yeah, it is snowing up here. It was a beautiful day, but I think it's snowing outside. I had to think long and hard about what brought me joy. Music, playing guitar is like, I play guitar and always have played guitar on my best days and my worst days. So I use it as like a reward. And when I'm like out of sorts, there's 2 songs that I play on repeat until I've calmed myself. And I close my eyes and I play them. And
What songs are they? Do you mind sharing?
Yeah, Chloe Dancer, Crown of Thorns by Mother Love Bone. So it's a piano piece. It's a beautiful song. It was on the singles soundtrack. I played on guitar. I transposed it so that I could play it. And it's this beautiful arpeggio riff that I could play with my eyes closed. And it's just, it lulls me into a sense of calm. And I can hear Andrew Wood singing about this, this girl, or what the song's about. It's beautiful and it calms me. And the other one is the intro to December by Collective Soul.
Nice.
It's the simplest riff. It's just rooted in G. But again, I could play it with my eyes closed. It's automatic. And it's just this cadence. And just that, I'm rocking back and forth as I'm telling the story because that's the vibe that it gives me. So I've identified 2 things. There's a few more. I walk at night, every night. I have a dog. But before I had a dog, I would walk 3-4K, the same loop around my area every night. And my brain just relaxed. And it's not like I'm a huge fan of walking, but it's so good for my brain. And I just recognized, I'm like, I actually love this. I don't have to think about where I'm going. It's the same loop. I could have headphones on, I can not, but my brain is just quiet. And for somebody who can't shut it off, it's on fire all the time, that is a gift. And I look forward to it every night, rain or shine. I walk. Everyone's different. Everyone's got suggestions, which is cool. Like, think about them and don't be afraid to try something that you're like, I don't know about that. If you're listening to this, you're like, I'm not a bath guy. I tell you what, if you had a nice bathtub and you got the right, stuff, you got a little setup in there, Bluetooth with the hockey game going.
You'll be a bath guy in no time.
Tell you what, it's not bad. It's pretty good.
And you don't have to tell anyone.
You don't have to. No, you don't. I don't care.
So
I can still like chop wood
go
with my
work
shirt off and chug a beer and play hockey boys. Like,
yeah.
Like it doesn't affect my masculinity at all. To say like, no, I like a good soak. Like it helps me. Look at our athletes. Like men, this is a totally tangent, but men especially. Sports are the only place where men have permission to be emotional. Think about that. We want our athletes emotional. The more emotional, the better. And they could be intimate with other men in a non-sexual way. And they could be open with their emotions and completely candid. Sports do that. So playing hockey, skating, and shitting with the boys. I love that. And it's not like we're patting bums all the time or whatever, but you get a stick tap, you get an arm over your shoulder on the bench or whatever. Like, hey, guess what? That's healthy and it's good. If that's something you enjoy, if sports, that camaraderie, you can lean into, trust me, I love a good chirp. I like little contact in hockey. You can embrace that masculine side of yourself. You can also just appreciate that, like, hey, I like doing something on a team. I like being with the boys in this kind of way. And you got to be honest with yourself, because there's so many distractions to keep you from doing the things that you love. You think there's stigma attached to it. There might be, but like you said, you don't have to tell anybody. Just do you.
Mm-hmm.
It's good for you. And like, get to know yourself. All of a sudden, like your daughter's like painting your nails, like, this is fun. You don't have to tell anybody. Do it more often. Like, if it feels good, if it calms you, if it makes you smile, do it. Life's short, so don't worry about what else anybody thinks. Like I said, you can still chop wood with your shirt off, chug beer any day of the week, but do what makes you happy. So
Yeah, exactly.
Self-care is important, but you got to go through that discovery phase. I tried hot yoga. I love yoga, by the way, but I tried hot yoga first, hated it. I hate being hot, and I'm like a sweaty, sticky mess. And I'm like, who does this except lizards? It's like, I got a bunch of friends that love going to like Jamaica in June. And I'm like, for what? Like, I hate being hot, but I did it. And I'm like, I like the movement. I like stopping in these positions and stretching and like breathing. I never focused on my breath before. But I'm like, oh, it's got like a cool effect. So I do regular yoga sometimes. And it's good for my body. It's made me stronger and that sort of thing. So yeah, just discover yourself. Don't apologize for what you like.
So last question. If I am a tradesperson, we'll keep it to the trades. Anyone really. This applies to anybody, but especially the tradespeople, as we're trying to kind of end the stigma. And I'm really struggling. Whether I'm struggling with anxiety or a feeling that I don't even know what to even call it. I'm questioning things. I'm, trying to numb some pain or some trauma. I'm abusing drugs or alcohol or whatever it is. I know I need help, but I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start. What tools are out there for someone like me that I can reach out and get the ball rolling on something?
One of the coolest things that technology has done is allowed us a level of anonymity when we're discovering things. And not because we are on one, but podcasts are pretty cool. No one knows what you're listening to except you. And you can throw something up at search. You can ask ChatGPT even. AI is the thing that's just going to be a part of our lives here right away. And it is fairly intuitive. You don't have to tell it your life story. Actually, I would recommend against that. But you could say like, hey, I'm looking for a podcast that talks about guys who drink a little bit too much on the weekend. And I want it to be, you can fine tune it, see what it spits out. But where I'm going with this is like, listen to someone who's kind of going through what you are. You have to seek them out, but they're not hard to find anymore. We have the internet at our fingertips. And let someone kind of talk about themselves, but it relates to your situation. It's a really validating moment. And it makes you feel like you're not alone, because when you're in it, and you guys know, it's the most isolating feeling.
Oh,
and
yeah.
you're keeping so much inside. You're like a kettle. And just being able to hear someone else who's kind of, it doesn't have to be exact, but someone who's just kind of going through it the way you are, it's so empowering. And it'll spark a lot of things in your mind, and you might get a little bit introspective, and that's a process too. Don't be scared of it. Always know that you're going to end up in a place better than where you are. Everything is impermanent, including the terrible feelings that you have, experiences that you have. They're impermanent, and it can feel like it's forever. When you're depressed or you're anxious, those moments can feel like they last forever, but they really don't. And after you've kind of validated what you're going through and you're like, okay, I'm not the only one dealing with this. Who do you talk to? When we talk about safe people, especially with kids, we help them identify who the safe people are in their lives. And parents always hope and wish that they are their child's safe person. You know what? The fact of the matter is, often they're not. And it's a teacher or it's one of their friends who they've identified as the safest person in their circle. And that's not a knock on the parents. That's just what everyone's going to decide who their go-to is, even in different situations. Your life is no different. I spoke earlier about having like a glut of friends. I'm very blessed that way. Not everybody has a big circle to lean on, and I'm really compassionate to that. But if you have someone that you've confided in before, you have a rapport with them, to tell someone in real life, even just to touch on it and be like, there's something going on. I'm not quite there yet that I want to talk to you, but let's check in like a couple days and I'm going to think about it. But just to break that ice, the courage that takes, you can celebrate that all the way. That's huge. Even just to break the ice. But if you can identify a safe person in your network, it's huge. It's invaluable. And that's what they're there for. Who doesn't love someone coming to them and saying, like, I need you. Can you help me? It feels good. So flip it around even. You're like, well, I know they're going to be happy that I came to them, or I hope they are. But getting the in out is really important. There's some great support groups. There's so many virtually. Leave your friggin' camera off. You just go and listen to stories. It's amazing. Everyone's got a story. Maybe one day you'll share yours. You know, you work through something, and kind of like how I did. I wasn't always like this where I could share, you know, what I've gone through. But I'll tell you, it's super validating. All the years of therapy and tears and confessions, and now I get to help people with that because I've healed to the point where I'm safe enough to share that. So that's something to look forward to. But you know, it's important to ask for help. People want to help. Even people who don't know you, they care about you. They love you. They're out there like me. I have time all day for anybody. I don't care what you've been through, what your view on life is, what your political leaning. I don't care. You're winging it like the rest of us. Of course you deserve support, and you deserve that. So if the first person you talk to can't help you, you can ask them to be your guide. Can we go together? Can you help me call this number? Can you help me talk to my boss? If you're in a relationship, you know, maybe that's a place of trust. But it's important to go through your circle and to identify like who you think you'd be safe with. It may not be who you think. And but it's important to try. Advocate for yourself.
Mm-hmm. And any, like, well, I mean, feel free to send me, we can talk after this too. But I want to put a bunch of like resources in the show notes too, of any, you know, like
Perfect. Yeah.
any sort of resources you'd recommend, or any numbers they could call depending on the situation. Cause there's all sorts of, you know, like suicide prevention stuff. Like if you're questioning, if you're at that point and you're questioning, please seek help. And there will be a number in our show notes. And you know, depending on where you're at, we'll it's a quick Google search too, right? But there's like you found a pro bono therapist. Like if money shouldn't stand in the way between you and getting better or getting the help that you need. Yeah, it just, I know my heart goes out to people who are struggling. And if you're listening to this right now and you're in that place, don't give up. There are tons of people that are here for you, there are tons of resources out there for you. There are people who understand. Like we've all been through so much stuff ourselves collectively. Just the three of us sitting here have been through enough to write a book, right? So you're not alone. And like you said, that can kind of be cliche, but it's kind of true.
It's nice to know. And you brought up a really good point. On my website, we should get specific with these resources. I hate broad brushing.
Please,
how to get help. So I'm really glad you kind of called us in to that. On my website specifically, I have a resources page. These are resources that I've either used personally or I've vetted and I've networked with, and I know exactly what they do, how they work, what will happen when you call that number. That kind of information is going up there soon. Whoever email me personally, go to my website, book a consultation. What I do with small businesses is I support them on an individual level. So I offer a service to a business who may not have a robust HR network, and I'm like, hey, I'll come in and do a little bit of training, and your team can get to know me, and then I'll be your touch point, and I won't let go. If you come to me with a challenge, with something that, and you're like, I don't know where to start, I don't know who to access, then we're going to do it together, and I will take you to the resource, and we're going to try different resources until you find a fit, until you start. That's the kind of interact, whether you're doing that with your friends or in your workplace, they want to go through me. That's sometimes we need our hand held because we're in it so deep. I've been there.
Sure. Yeah.
I've been there. I can't just call a hotline. You know how many times I hung up on hotlines? Lots. Or I didn't call them because I'm like, I don't know. It was going to be Sally on the other end who's going to read me into drink 8 glasses of water a day. We have these conversations. We talk ourselves out of it. It's important that even as an individual, if you're in a position to help, great. If you don't know what to do with someone who's coming to you with a challenge, be their liaison, be their guide. Be like, you know what? I don't know what to do anymore, but I will not let go of you. We will go together. We will figure out the next step for you, the two of us. And that is such a powerful gift that you can give somebody. So I'll tout my own website too. There are ways to access me personally, but there's a resource page that I go through all the time, and I make sure that everything there is vetted. It's a province-wide, national, and you can ask me questions personally. You could tweet me. You can go to my Instagram and be like, Kris, what's the suicide hotline like? I've called it. I'll tell you what it's like, and it's fantastic, for the record. And they really do stay with you until they feel that you're safe. So, but you don't know before you know, and it can be a scary place to be.
So we'll link to, we'll link all that in the show notes of this episode. I just want to provide as many tangible resources for people that I can, or that we can, and just to help people get the help that they need. Kris, thank you so much for sharing your story, taking the time, coming on, talk about the heavy, but the not so heavy. Like you said, mental health doesn't have to be heavy, right? It can be full of joy and love and excitement, but there are some heavy things too, but we can get through it together. And I just want to say thank you for coming on and sharing your wisdom, sharing your experience, and sharing a message of hope to people who are going through this stuff.
I really appreciate the opportunity, and I love the platform that you've built to have these conversations, and to what you're doing is so important. It's just another access point for people to relate and find a niche that speaks to them, and you're platforming really important messages. And I'm really proud of you. It's a privilege to be here.
Thank you.
So well done on your part too. And keep up the great work. And if you're into the lighter side of mental health, yes, as you clicked on earlier, there's a little clip of my mental health comedy. You could let me know if I'm funny or not. You won't hurt my feelings.
We'll share that. We'll put that in the notes too.
It's a work in progress, right? But that's just one avenue. Yeah, no, mental health doesn't have to be weird. But,
where can people find you as we kind of wrap up here?
If you so VIV is spelled VIV Mental Health. So at VIV Mental Health on pretty much every platform. So Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, I do those occasionally. My website is vivmentalhealth.com. I got a podcast, Spotify, Apple, all those platforms. It's just the VIV Mental Health Podcast. But yeah, if you're listening, you want to reach out, touch base, info@vivmentalhealth.com. I'm the one that answers those emails. So shoot me one. Say hi, have a question, need support. I got all day for you. So
Awesome.
yeah, full access.
Perfect. Well, thanks again so much for coming on. We'll link all that in our show notes of this episode. Kris, once again, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks to everyone for listening. Thanks all.
Thanks, Rosie.
And we'll catch you guys on the next one.